Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 179. Self-plagiarism. And yes, I'm surrounded by dragons and wizards, and indeed, my favourite zombie, baseball bat. It looks a bit like a Stevie Nicks music video and I'm an extra in it, but there is a reason why I've gathered all these mythical objects together, and that is because we're discussing a mythical concept. Yes, self-plagiarism. And I have got my zombie baseball bat, one of my favourite objects in the universe, because today we're going to smash this concept to absolute pieces. So stay with me. Good morning from an impossibly early morning, a witchy early morning. Let's do this. So to get into this story, I'm using an old research technique that may be useful to you sometimes. Whenever you're approaching a topic and you're trying to think about what is going on, one question can often provide a way into that conversation. And that question is, what changed? So why suddenly has self-plagiarism emerged? Let's ask the question, what's changed? So what has occurred? Well, I can tell you there is a really legitimate narrative into the invention of this concept, and that involves the 3 Ds: digitisation, disintermediation, and deterritorialisation. The 3 Ds came together to change academic publishing. What those 3 Ds mean is that right now, today, high quality academic work is available for free, and not only in refereed articles, but also in podcasts, in academic journalism, and indeed in a series of YouTube videos. The proliferation of academic journals, so that means right now we have so many more journals than we've had at any point in academic history. But what that means is the proliferation of journals. It means that gatekeepers in our disciplines have less power. More journals means more editorial boards, more referees, and new types of power structures. So we have a leaner, flatter, and more transparent way of thinking about power in academic publishing. So that meant that the star chamber, the very few academics often positioned in North America and Europe, suddenly lost a lot of power. But also, besides the 3 Ds, the big AC also changed. That is, the transformations of and to academic capitalism through the corporatisation of our universities, indeed, through the corporatisation of knowledge. So at the point that high quality information is freely available based on the service and the commitment of distinguished scholars, all of us who referee, we referee for free. We do not charge journals for that service. It is free for the public good. But what that meant is, with us giving our work for free, academic publishers needed to find a new way to make money from the time that academics give for free in terms of research and writing. And of course, it's not given for free. The taxpayer in all our nations pay our salary. So we give that, the taxpayers' money that makes our salary, to academic publishers. So for free, which they then make money off. So what's going on? What changed? Well, the RAE, the REF in the United Kingdom, the ERA in Australia, therefore, in this environment, invented particular ways of assessing quality research. Bless. So that, therefore, reinforced the power of the gatekeepers in the peer review disciplines, and then also reinforced the power of particular journals once more by validating journal rankings and particular citation indices. So even with the world of academic publishing changing as radically as it has in the last 10 years, these conservative moments and movements pretended that digitisation, disintermediation and deterritorialisation never actually happened. There is money to be made from academic research, from selling publications, and of course money can't be made in platinum open access journals where nobody pays for the articles going in or articles going out, and indeed it's given for free from the public good of the academics serving those journals. And of course social media and Google searches, let alone Google Scholar, allow us to find refereed articles anywhere through hashtags, say on Twitter, but also through keywords. So none of us now read a journal what I call vertically. So we look at the contents page, we read it all the way through. What we do is we go into Google Scholar and we put in some key terms, and wherever those articles may appear, we read them. Topic-based, author-based, not journal-based. So I call that horizontal reading, not a vertical reading. So we cut through all journals and read on a topic. Therefore, in a time when that's how we're all doing this work, we're inventing these citation indexes and so forth, we need to invent a folk devil to get scholars all a little bit agitated, feeling threatened, feeling fearful, to keep us focusing on old ways of doing knowledge. And one of those folk devils is, yes, you've guessed it, it is self-plagiarism. Remember that businesses have made money out of inventing self-plagiarism. Yes, the publishers are inventing money by doing this, but also so are the text matching firms, organisations and businesses like Turnitin. Now, for example, they have a section on their website on self-plagiarism. So if you look at writecheck.com/self-plagiarism, you'll see it. And let me just read to you their explanation on their website. Quote, "The idea of self-plagiarism seems almost ridiculous, comma, but it's a very real issue with real consequences. Self-plagiarism is the use of your own previous work in another context without citing that it was used previously. Self-plagiarism rules are fixed in some areas and hazy in others." End of quote. Okay, so the point is, self-plagiarism is invented. It's imaginary, it's mystical. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, though, the phrases and the ideas and the concepts that exist under self-plagiarism, right? And there's some interesting and important conversations we do need to have about that, and all of our behaviours do now need to change. But at its most basic, and this is if you get nothing else out of the video today, get this. This issue of self-plagiarism has a quick fix. So self-citation solves the problem of self-plagiarism. Full stop. Self-cite. Now, when I was a young academic, when dragons still roamed the earth, only manic fools, dreadful people, truly appalling academics would cite themselves. They were losers, okay? And it's a real look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's a dreadful thing. Dreadful people self-cited. Because basically it was saying, oh yes, I know these tens of thousands of great scholars exist in the world publishing in this area, but you know what? I'm better than they are, and I'm just going to read myself because I'm a legend. But now that we've invented dragons and zombies and self-plagiarism, oh my, that now that we've invented that, we have to use the zombie baseball bat of self-citation to manage it. And we're going to talk about how to do that, right? Now, I just want to make a few more comments about self-plagiarism, then I'm going to provide you with 6 ideas that I'd like you to think about. No directives today, but just here are 6 topics that are emerging right now, and I do need you to mitigate, all of us, mitigate and manage our response to those issues. And particularly, I wanted to log one incredibly courageous article. There are courageous scholars on this planet, and I'm proud to be in their number. It's simply one of the most courageous articles I think has been published in the 2010s. And this article written by Jamie Callahan in 2018 in the journal Organisation. And the title was The Retrospective Immoralisation of Self-Plagiarism. End of quote. Magnificent. So he stares down the dragons and the zombies of self-plagiarism, and he really represents the best, I think, of what academic life can be like. Callahan states that, quote, self-plagiarism is a misnomer that has been retrospectively immoralised through regimes of power. End of quote. He attacks and he describes, quote, the appropriation of my authorial voice by power elites in the institutional fields of plagiarism. Unbelievable. End of quote. He shows that self-plagiarism is a socially constructed version of ethics. Now, where I would dialogue with Jamie Callaghan is, I think all ethics are socially constructed. They do change through time. But the speed of the invention of this concept really does show its self and socially constructed nature. What we do know through this conversation is our words matter. Our words matter a lot because they're our capital, our professional identity, and indeed financially beneficial to us. These words become commodities that enable us to build our careers. Now that this profit appeared to be declining from academic publishing through the 2000s, new problems had to be invented. And guys, if I can just do the parallel for you with the music industry. So when digitisation and the sharing of files, music files, emerged through the 2000s, the business model for the music industries had to transform, and they were panicked. Now, academic publishing could have gone the same way through digitisation, but they implemented a series of strategies like self-plagiarism to continue to make money. And academic publishers have never been more profitable than they are today. So let me show you the scale of this invention, okay? In 2005, the number of Google hits to self-plagiarism was 8,000. 2005, 8,000. In 2013, it was 82,500. And in 2016, it was 2 million. But where this invented problem becomes meaningful and becomes important is it asks all of us as scholars to think about what originality means and what ownership means. And these are productive conversations and thoughts for us to be implementing. It also asks that you as PhD students think very, very actively about who owns your words and the pathway of your words through publishing. When you are signing your rights away to those words, you need to understand what you are doing. So self-plagiarism, yes, is an invented folk devil. It began in the medical sciences and then proceeded to infect, quite appropriately, infect the rest of academic life. So where did it come from? It came from COPE, the Committee on Public Ethics. It was founded in 1997 by the editors of, you've guessed it, medical journals. Now, the phrase self-plagiarism has existed for a long time. It's circulated for well over a century, and in 1897, in the Atlantic Monthly, an editorial, a letter to the editor appeared in the Atlantic Monthly that mentioned the phrase self-plagiarism. But interestingly, in 1897, it was used as a good thing. So do use self-plagiarism, writers out there, because you're finding new audiences for your work. Okay, so what we're going to do in this vlog is unpick, indeed what I'm trying to do is burn off the surface of self-plagiarism and look at the legitimate conversations we need to be having with the stuff underneath it. Okay, and this is the important bit. So self-plagiarism basically refers to 4 different entities. And all of them are actually very different. So this self-plagiarism stuff is blocking the 4 very distinctive conversations we need to be having. So self-plagiarism refers to duplicate publications, so same article published in 2 or more journals or different forms, salami slicing of data sets, redundant publications, and textual recycling. But all of these phrases and behaviours are on a continuum. So in other words, it's very easy to go, oh look, that's a duplicate publication. Actually, it's not black and white. There is a continuum. It's much more complicated than that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So dual or duplicate publications seem sort of the no-brainer here. But the duplicate publication issue now includes, and this is the invention of this concept, now you need to hang on to yourself here, duplicate publication now includes those of us who trial out a paper at a conference get the questions, get the feedback, then come home and write up that conference paper. Now, delivering a piece of research at a conference and then putting it in a journal, by some of these definitions, that is also self-plagiarism. So see what I'm saying? That's normal. You've got to call this. That's what academics do. We get funding to go to a conference, to trial out a new idea, get the feedback, come home, write up the conference presentation. But now, no, that supposedly is a problem too. See the craziness of this? So then there is the salami slicing of data. Now, basically what this involves, supposedly, is taking a very, very large data set from a lab or a clinical study and salami slicing the data set up to maximise publications. Now, supposedly that's a problem. But think about the alternative way of reading this problem. Okay, well, we're selecting the data sets that work well with a particular journal and the audience of that journal. So we're picking the data and the interpretation of that data that best works for that audience. So is that salami slicing a data set, or is that actually maximising impact and engagement? Okay? Then we have the redundant publication matter. This is astounding to me. So ideas or an existing data set is used again in a different publication with a distinctive theoretical slant, right? So that means using a different theory to offer a different reinterpretation of findings. Now, this process, I know you're looking, what, that's a problem. It's like, this is really, really common in the social sciences and the humanities. This is what we do. This is what qualitative research is. That's why we have words like lens, the lens on the data. We have words like frame. We frame the data set, and we move through those multiple subjectivities and theories throughout our career. For example, I do a lot of work on Baudrillard, Jean Baudrillard, and Ulrich Beck, and I've done that work for 20 years, and I work through their theories through a range of different topics, from Lady Gaga to the zombie apocalypse, from cosmopolitanism through to death studies. So I take that body of theory, I engage with it and change it in different ways and apply it to a different subject. Okay? So these publications are not redundant. I am reflexively engaging with the history of ideas for different topics, right? So finally, textual recycling. This is the area that's probably most associated with what is self-plagiarism. So we've written something. It may be a methods section in a scientific paper. It could be a humanities theorisation or a concept. So like a zombie concept from Ulrich Beck, say. And this text is reused in some form, either directly, so you've scooped up your own text and you've put it somewhere else, textual recycling, or you've paraphrased it relatively closely. Okay. Now, as Cronin has argued, what a legend Cronin is, has argued in the 2013 article in the Journal of the American Society for Information Science and Technology. Wonderful journal, quite a mouthful. I'll say that again, the Journal of the American Society for the Information Sciences and Technology. Now, Cronin argues we cannot steal from ourselves. Full stop. If I take my car, which is sitting over there, if I take my car out of the garage and take that for a drive, I'm not stealing that car. I own that car. But the problem we've got, and the problem Cronin's got in his argument, is that when we're thinking about our words and our ideas, this is becoming increasingly complex because some of us have actually signed our rights away from using that text. So when you've signed that contract with the publisher, you've signed that text away. So in other words, I've sold my car to my neighbour, so therefore I just can't go and drive it because I no longer own it. I've sold the car. Now, if you do that, you no longer own the words, so you are infringing copyright. And that's where publishers have had to invent the phrase self-plagiarism. And what it's trying to do, self-plagiarism, from a publisher's perspective, is it's trying to make all of us as academics all a bit anxious and a bit frightened. Oh, it's such a frightening word because plagiarism is so scary, so let's just add a word in front of it that makes it completely nonsensical but still makes us really, really scared, okay? Instead of us actually questioning, hang on a second, what have I signed away? What is going on with these academic publishing contracts. Instead of asking that really complicated question, we sort of go, oh, self-plagiarism. No, ask the question, what have you signed? What have you signed? Now, the important bit of this conversation is that originality is important. But also I do know that knowledge develops in a gradual and incremental way through an entire career. Most disciplines, do not have a discrete data set, that here's a discrete data set which I'm now going to write up in a journal, and then I'm going to completely do a different data set and have a discrete data set and write that up for a different journal. Most disciplines do not work like that. So some big projects, team, take decades. They're a life's work. This is not about the recycling of words. This is about the development of knowledge, and they're different things. Also, and this is the weird thing about our current bonkers time, is we're all being encouraged to do translational research. So yes, publish the academic work, but then you have to engage with impact and engagement and send the work out and about into the world for different audiences. So you can see the problem. Here we go. So no, you can't textually recycle your stuff, but you need to make sure that research goes to diverse audiences. Okay, so while the textual recycling issue does have some legitimate grounding, just remember it has become an issue now because we as authors do not own the text that we are supposedly recycling. That's why it's an issue. We've signed those rights away. So that's why the conversation is really about international and national copyright law. So what we actually need is not the folk devil of self-plagiarism. We need more complex theorization of intertextuality and multimodality. Academic work, the whole point of what we're doing here, is about impact, is about finding multiple audiences, about making a difference with what happens with our research. And this conversation really is not about self-plagiarism, and why I get so cross is this whole conversation is demonstrating no awareness of any kind about how books are written. Because we live, as we know, in a highly anti-intellectual age. And I cannot tell you how many times somebody, since I moved back to Australia, 5-6 years ago, how many people have said to me since I moved back to Australia the phrase, books don't matter. Really, books don't matter. They say it to me. And yes, those people that say that have never written a book, okay? So therefore, I'm sorry, if you haven't written a book, you do not understand how knowledge, how 80 or 90,000 words comes together on a topic, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So therefore, let me give you not really 6 strategies, but 6 ideas for you to make decisions about in your career from today forward. Now, this is going to be quite important, okay? So point 1, be confident and continue to build new knowledge. So what I want you to do is look at your research all the time, but I want you to always grow it and extend it. So this is not self-plagiarism. Focus on originality, how you develop knowledge over your lifetime. And remember, all of us revisit ideas that we thought about a year ago, 5 years ago, decades ago. That is normal. The key now is to state, and this is the important bit, what you've got to do now, what all of us have to do now, is state, right, well, look, I explored these ideas 2 years ago or 20 years ago, and present those ideas, paraphrase them as you talked about them 20 years ago, and then put the citations in of you and that work that you developed, right? You need to do that and then go, right, this is how that work has now developed. So this is what I did do, here are the references, here is how I'm developing it, here is my originality now. Extend the thoughts. Now, some of these unicorns and wizards and dragons may still refer to this as self-plagiarism, okay? It's not self-plagiarism, this is the extension of ideas. But now we all have to be very alert in the movement of those ideas. I also just want to go to one remarkable phrase, if I can, from my late husband, Professor Steve Rettig. As some of you know, after Steve died, I was asked to write the prologue for the second version of his book, The End of the Century Party. And the prologue ended up being 24,000 words in length, okay? And it was a privilege to do this. I had read all his work, obviously, throughout my life, but I read all his books again, and I read these hundreds of articles. Again, I read everything, 17 books, hundreds of articles. And I remember thinking with incredible joy and pride and respect to see that tissue of connectedness, how ideas do develop over a lifetime, as I read A Lifetime of a Scholar. But I also remember a statement that Steve said, and he published with Manchester University Press twice in his career, The End of the Century Party and his book Unpopular Cultures. So 5 years separated these two monographs for MUP. But he stated with incredible honesty in Unpopular Cultures a phrase that I think we all need to remember today. Quote, "It is unavoidably the case that parts of unpopular cultures could have appeared in the End of the Century Party and vice versa, where one text in a writer's canon finishes and another begins is, in a sense, highly arbitrary." End of quote. So remember this, Steve lived an academic life of profound distinction and originality. He created new disciplines, okay? And yet he reminds us all from the grave that the relationship between texts in our canon are, quote, highly arbitrary, end of quote. 2, keep your distinctive writing voice. All of us, indeed, all the best academic writers in the world have an incredibly distinctive style, and this distinctiveness creates their scholarly voice. Now, I need you to hold on to that scholarly voice, because the nature of self-plagiarism is it's trying to alter the way academics write and express themselves. And actually, the best of writers have a distinctive way of doing our business. And for example, with me, I'm very clear. You can pick my stuff a mile off. Short sentences, lack of adjectives, very long paragraphs, very few headings, heavy referencing, long, expansive footnotes. I slam together highly disparate disciplines and ideas. I try to always use new scholars, new journals, internationalized knowledge, so I'm not just focusing on Europe and North America. I often have a story that starts the piece and a zombie apocalypse ending to it. Now, that's not a template, but that is how I write. So it is very important, so important, team, with all this stuff going on about self-plagiarism. Do not get spooked. Do not get frightened. Hold on to what makes your writing extraordinary and distinctive. Center yourself. Be confident. Remember, replicating the form of writing is not self-plagiarism. We're focusing on, you've guessed it, the content. 3, this is the big one. It's tough, this. 3, managing textual recycling when we're dealing with translational research. This is really important that we get this right. The part of self-plagiarism that's really important, I think, is the duplicate publication matter. So the identical work that's published again without recognizing the earlier version. But what happens if you've done substantive research, you've done a really big project, and you publish a refereed academic article, but then you want to find those alternative audiences in a professional publication, or in a newsletter, or in a different type of professional journal, or a piece of journalism, right? Okay, so we have to do this. The role of being a scholar is to find different audiences. That's our job. So how are we going to do this without having textual recycling? See the problem? So what I do, and I hope this might be useful to you when I'm doing this, is I read my refereed article and then I put it away. I put it aside. I don't cut and paste, I don't do any of that. I've read it and I just sit and write, and I say, right, this is where I'm writing it. It's for that audience. And I start writing at what I call freestyle. So I write 1,000 words that takes the key idea from that particular article and makes it work for a specific audience. Now, okay, that freestyle often works because it means you're not cutting and pasting, you're not doing weird paraphrasing. What you then need to do after you've done that freestyle is, firstly, make sure you've got a citation to that refereed article. Self-citation manages self-plagiarism. So firstly, make sure there's a full link to the original article, and then do check the two. Put them side by side and make sure that the prose is distinctive enough. And it should be, because it's got a different audience and a different series of priorities. So this is not self-plagiarism. They're written differently, you cite the original, and it's got a different audience. And really, we need to focus more on the audiences for our research, and that will determine how we cut, how we mould, how we shape, and how we express our information. So these pieces are actually written differently. 4, wow, claim your role in the development of ideas. State how you have worked in this field. State how your work has developed this concept, developed these ideas, where it's been delivered, where it's been published, whether it be podcasts or journalism or book reviews or this particular gig or a seminar, wherever it's been delivered. And what I need you to do is paraphrase that original work. Try to avoid, on every occasion if you can, the direct cut and paste of that work. Please note that you really can't use that work if you have cited it away. If you've signed it away through copyright, it's not yours to cut and paste, team. You can't use it anymore, but you can paraphrase and, wow, put in lots and lots of references. So we're now at a time where you're going to have to reference yourself heavily. So you need to log your role in the development of ideas and then how you're building on them. So self-citation is the new normal. We just got to get on with it. Self-citation is what we have to do. And we need to be honest with what this new normal looks like. They want self-citation to avoid self-plagiarism. Well, you know what? Let's give it to them. Let's give it to them. But also, can we show some respect, please, for the non-empirical disciplines? At the moment, all of this discussion is about, salami slicing data sets, repeating scientific methods. And look, you know me, I love all disciplines. I love every scholar, every different way of doing methodology, ontology, epistemology. I love knowledge, and I respect all scholars. But part of what's going on with this self-plagiarism nonsense is a disrespect of the humanities and the social sciences, and we have to call this out. Let me tell you how humanities ideas emerge. So I might write a 400-word book review, and I come up with an interesting phrase, and I go, there's something there. Or I write a 1,000-word piece of journalism. I might record a podcast, or I might conduct a video like I'm doing today. So I create an idea, and then I go, wow, okay. And then I'll shape that into an argument. Now I may produce a refereed article from that, and you know what? Some of those articles may grow into a scholarly monograph, into a book. This is actually how ideas develop. This is what happens. And that's why I get so incredibly cross with people who have not written a book in their entire career, talking to somebody like me who gets up at 2 o'clock in the morning on my own and writes 80,000 words in length for books. You know, you guys are telling me how I'm developing my ideas. Author of 1, not 2, not 3, not 5, not mass authorship, not 10 authors. 1 person, 2 o'clock in the morning writing, and you're telling me about authorship and how I write. Right. So what does self-plagiarism mean for people like me and all my colleagues out there who are so horrified about this, and we're not having this conversation, and we need to? So what it means, team, is our behaviour has to change probably more than any of the other disciplines. We have to now self-cite the entire scaffold. So it might start with that book review or that piece of journalism, how it's developed through a podcast or an interview or a video, and then how that article is extended into a book. So for example, I am currently writing an article on self-plagiarism, commencing from the idea you guys gave me and this vlog. So of course I will cite this vlog. I will write a piece of journalism about it, and then I'll play with text and show how in the article all this different prose can be changed. But remember, in some form this will be a book chapter in the new book that I'm writing. There'll be no copyright breaches in any of these movements of text because I have platinum open access. So copyright law is not involved in the discussion that we're having here, but other issues therefore can be prioritised. So if you as an individual, are out there and you're developing your research ideas, not in a team and not in a lab, but on your own, the truth is that ideas develop through time. This is not textual recycling. This is the development of ideas. When we write an article, we don't know if it's going to become a book. Most articles don't. I've written, 200 plus refereed articles, and I'm about to publish my 20th book, okay? Most articles do not become a book, but some do. And when they do, the article doesn't become a chapter. The article is cut up, some of it is deleted, and bits and pieces of it are put throughout 80,000 words. So what now has to happen is we will self-cite heavily. Hope that helps you. 5, this is the biggie, avoid textual recycling, or at least manage it the best that you can. The bit of the zombie apocalypse bit of self-plagiarism that really is worth discussing, I think, is textual recycling. This manifests very differently in different disciplines, but it's an issue for all disciplines. So in the lab-based sciences, guys, I hear you. It is terrible what you guys are being asked to do. Do I really have to present identical methods in different words? So how many times can I write the phrase differently? And I'll use a quote from my wonderful husband, Professor Jamie Quinton. So this appeared in one of his articles. So let's do this. Quote, "The iron, chromium and zinc sheets were cut into 10 by 10 millimeter squares for dipping and analysis." End of quote. Well done, Jamie. Okay, there it is. So what are we going to do with that sentence? So we go, we have to paraphrase it. Do I change the word dipping for marinate? Do I marinate the zinc sheets? Also for you guys in the lab-based sciences, this is so serious because you have to confirm the continuity of the methods. So of course that's everything. You need to confirm the rigour, confirm the repeatability. So why would you change the language? Because that's then raising the question of consistency of methods. So I absolutely hear you. So what are we going to do? Right, now the problem you've got is when you're using the same scientific methods in a new paper with the same techniques, you probably, in the nature of the sciences, you probably have signed the right to use those words away. So you actually can't use them again. So you've got to try and find a way to say, right, well, can you paraphrase it? Can you truncate it? Can you do something with it to just change the words a bit and make sure that you've got the reference to the original article? Okay, the self-cite to manage self-plagiarism, okay? And the problem you guys have got is, you know, you have signed those words away, so you can't use them. That's a law thing. That's not sort of an academic ethics thing. But also do think about, and this might be useful for you, how different audiences might change how you think about methods. And the great example is always, I think, Nature. The Nature papers have a different way of expressing methods. And I think if we use Jamie's as an example, when I've been looking at Jamie's work, applied surface science has a very different audience to Nature. And so when you're expressing those scientific methods, the way you express them is different. You've still got to cite the original one, but again, that might help you think about the audience and how the audience for those methods might transform too. So the other strategy which is recommended, and this is a shocker too, I know, is if you can't paraphrase the methods, marinating the zinc sheets, if you can't paraphrase it, unusually for science, put a quote around it. Put a quote around it and put that bracketed reference at the end to the original article. Now I know all of these are dreadful options for you, and a lot of referees are often unhappy with the strategy. So you try and stop self-citation, you do these strategies, the referees go, oh no, I want to see the full methods. Right, okay. Therefore, let's try some other possibilities for you. Think about your audience, think about the audience for your research, shape the methods section for that audience and tell the story in a different way. Cite the first paper in the second paper, do a brief recap, and then basically thanks for playing. The more innovative suggestion that I really do recommend for the big projects is put the full methods discussion, so the whole project's method discussion, into an open access environment and cite that with every new paper. An example that I found for this open presentation of methods is protocols.io. Protocols.io. An incredible open access environment for scientific methods. So put the big presentation there and then pull it for each of the individual articles. So this is a new strategy for the presentation of methods that I think is going to solve a lot of problems. But what I think all of this is suggesting to us is we have to recognize and track the movement of texts. We have to self-cite, and you know what, even in the hard sciences, sometimes you guys might have to quote your methods. But what it's asking all of us to do, team, is monitor very, very carefully the movement of our texts. Don't mask the movement anymore. Don't mask it, log it, hyper-reference it. Okay, 6, the biggie. Watch copyright. Watch what you are signing. I had a brilliant young man in my office nearly a year ago, and he was seriously worried, and rightly so. He'd published a chapter of his thesis as an article, or really what he'd done is published an article and wanted to find a way to put it in as a chapter of his thesis. But he realised with some horror that he'd signed a shocking contract with the publisher. Frequently publishers allow you to use the preprint or the text word version. You can put that in a repository and you can use that in a thesis. But in the last year, team, contracts with publishers are tightening and some shocking contracts are being produced. Can I say I've signed, I think, 4 in the last year, and I've had about 3 or 4 goes with the publishers sending the contracts, changing them. Okay, you need to read them, you need to change, you need to negotiate. Now, I only publish my referee articles in platinum open access journals. I don't pay to publish them, readers do not pay to read them, and I have complete control over how I use those words in the future. So when I'm approaching and thinking about publishing in my life, they're the areas I focus on. So again, we mustn't confuse the issue of self-plagiarism with the signing of rights away to publishers. That's the key issue. So when you're talking about reusing your words, if you've signed those words away, they're no longer your words to use. Okay, so full stop. No textual recycling. They're no longer your words. You've sold your words. They're not yours to recycle. So if you haven't sold them, then please use some of the strategies that I've talked about today. Self-plagiarism is about power. And we all have to ask ourselves, who is gaining power from enforcing and imagining these new definitions, this new concept of self-plagiarism? And this is a moment in our scholarly history where you have to ask yourself, what do you stand for? Because self-plagiarism is a moment of recalibration. Recalibration between scholarly interests and corporate interests. So this discussion of ethics is a mask, I think, to stop us asking the tough questions about who controls our words, who owns our ideas, and why academic publishers are slicing our research up to make a profit. So for example, we talk about the slicing up of data sets, right? That's a problem. But my books that I've sold to publishers, they slice the chapters up and sell the chapters individually. I wrote that as a whole book where each chapter talks to each other. They ignore that, slice it up, sell the individual slices because I've sold them that book. Okay. And remember, firms like Turnitin have got a new profit centre now. They've moved from the surveillance of undergraduate assignments and into academic publishing, surveying in academic publishing in particular. So there are some legitimate problems that we do have to discuss with regard to cutting up things into small parts, the reuse of text, duplicate publications. Absolutely, there are legitimate conversations to be had. But remember, these are not definitive issues or mandates or problems. These are nodes of discussion between scholars. So Callaghan recommends a really powerful solution, that all our guidelines now revolve around two words: authenticity and audience. Authenticity describes for us how our already existing work moves into something new. So we're really, really clear on that. How does what we do now move into new areas? And I think that's a really productive conversation to be had. What is the original work I'm doing today? And how does it build on the past? And cite that past. But then also the discussion about audience. Audience specifies who are the different readers for that research, particularly if it is cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, or indeed post-disciplinary. And we do need to have this intervention right now. The Academy of Management has now summoned the full zombie apocalypse by insisting that all ideas are cited, all electronic sources, unpublished ideas and words must be cited. So the self-citation now has reached the point of madness. We have to self-cite tweets, Facebook posts, curriculum. So teaching and learning materials now must be cited in our research. Emails must be cited. Academy of Management. So this is a war against zombies. And we're battling two irrational, dreadful forces: self-plagiarism and, yes, self-citation. So let's give them hell. Let's give them what they want. Let's fight self-plagiarism through self-citation, rendering the citation measurements even more bonkers than they are right now. Let's resist. Let's stand up for something. You check every single contract you sign. You cite every single scaffolding publication that got you to this point. Cite the unpublished versions of the work, including social media. And in this way, together, we're going to reveal that this folk devil of self-plagiarism is not the Wizard of Oz, but an old white guy behind a curtain, trying to hold on to the power that he once had, and trying to make us forget that there are alternative ways of reading, writing, thinking, and making knowledge. I wish you love, light, and peace. Let's do this. Tea out.